Good morning, everybody. My name is Terry Helton. I'm a registered nurse and the chair of the Ventura County Coalition for Compassionate Care. And we meet once a month as a general membership to discuss and understand what is needed in advanced care planning and serious illness conversations and for what surrounds those ideas. And we're learning more and more that there is more to discuss. So if you are interested in the Ventura County Coalition for Compassionate Care, please go to our website for past events that we've had, for more information as we connect to the State Coalition for Compassionate Care with documents accessible on there. That is vccccc.org, vccccc.org. And I am excited this morning. I am really actually very anxious to hear about this subject and what Katie and Ken are going to share. But before that, let me introduce them and talk about how great they are. It is part of the Coalition for Compassionate Care. It's very wonderful to have a variety of people. So we have a variety of, I happen to be a nurse. We have the community-based Center of Senior Concerns with people who work with seniors every day. We have hospital people such as Dr. Jazz Carr-Vermani and Dr. Reyes from Jazz is from Dignity and Carlo is from Los Robles. So we have a variety of people. We have attorneys. We've had people who work with the funeral process. So having all of these people is an amazing thing, and it helps us see the bigger picture. So just saying, share with your friends and invite them. So as we get started and people are joining, let me talk a little bit about Ken. Kenneth W. Kossoff has been an attorney since 1983 and in practice in Westlake Village since 1998. Ken is an estate planner, probate and trust law specialist certified by the State Bar of California of Legal Specialization. Ken co-founded Solo Aging Solutions, LLC, after recognizing the need to support and provide qualified healthcare decision-making services to those who do not have anyone they can elect to serve as their healthcare agent under their advanced care directive. Katie Wiltfong is a medical social worker with a master's of social work from the University of Southern California. Katie has a background in hospice care and has worked the last several years for Buena Vista Home Health, palliative and hospice. From her experience in working with older adults and those facing terminal illness, Katie co-founded Solo Aging Solutions, LLC, a company dedicated to providing informed healthcare decision-making to clients when they are no longer able to do so themselves. And before they begin to speak, I have to say that I have spoke to the public on advanced care planning many times, having individuals walk up to me and ask, how do I do this? Because I don't have a family member, or I don't have a family member I trust to make decisions for me. I don't have friends to make decisions for me. I don't know what to do. What can you suggest? And so having Ken and Katie today share about a new concept is very, very exciting. And I will now be quiet and give the floor to Ken.
Good morning, everybody. Let me pull up the slideshow. Okay, so as Terry said, I'm an attorney. I do estate planning, and Katie started working at my law firm about 6.5 years ago or so to try and help my clients coordinate elder care and do care management. And what she also has done is to speak to clients about healthcare directives and to have a far more meaningful conversation than I can because of my background versus her background. But as Terry was saying, over the years, when we've spoken to people, people have made presentations in the community, people have come up, also sometimes clients have come up and asked if Katie would be their agent under the healthcare directive, and the answer was a polite no, which I knew was because she did not want to get a call 4 years into the future, trying to remember who those people are and have no idea what had happened in their healthcare or medical care for the past 4 years. So we started working on a protocol with certainly Katie in the lead, so that we would
Good
feel.
morning, Carly. This is Phil from Right at Home.
Oh,
How are you today? I hope I didn't call too early.
Okay, so hopefully Phil will
please
mute
hit that.
himself.
Everybody mute yourselves.
So, that's how we, and today I think we're here to talk about that protocol in large part because it's the conversation that we talk about a lot in meetings of the VC-CCC. So, Katie, do you want to?
Or if you want to go to the next slide.
Sure.
So as Ken said, we really created Solo Aging Solutions to kind of fill the gap. We were, through the research and through conversations with people in the community, we found that a lot of people didn't have someone to speak on their behalf. And there's a lot of good data that's coming out regarding the baby boomers and the percentage of people who didn't have children or people who are single. And while there's fiduciaries and CPAs and trustees all focused and geared towards managing someone's finances later in life, there was really no one taking on the task of managing healthcare. The clients we serve right now are anywhere from early retirement age to 90, from people who have really no health or cognitive limitations at all, to gentlemen who live in boarding cares, who are bedbound and really need a lot more intensive decision-making on their behalf. If you want to go to the next slide, Ken. The biggest goal of Solo Aging Solutions really is to make sure that our clients feel comfortable, that their healthcare agent is able to speak on their behalf, knows their healthcare wishes and values, and will make the decisions they would make if they were able to. And in turn, as a healthcare agent, really having a good background on each client and feeling fully confident in stepping into their shoes and knowing that the client would have made the same decisions if they were able to, with their medical history or with end of life situations. Coming up with kind of a protocol to ensure that we have this open communication and the ability to meet our clients' needs. We came up kind of with different ways to ensure that we have an open line of communication. So the first obvious is having a consultation. I think it's important for the clients to feel comfortable coming to us and understanding our protocol and the need to have that open line of communication, and also for us to feel that they're understanding of our role and what that entails. If someone does elect to use us as their healthcare agent, we then assist with coordinating with their attorney so that they can complete their advanced healthcare directive. There's also just discussions about ensuring that they have other advanced planning in place where they have someone maybe to manage their finances. We do not do the financial piece, but we're always encouraging people to continue advanced planning with their trust or with looking into having other advisors in place. The next step would be kind of an initial assessment, which I usually do in about a two-part. The first is to really get a good idea of someone's health history, maybe past medical conditions, really get a good understanding of the different experiences they've had that may affect their decision-making and their views on their healthcare. I think it also kind of helps to keep that continued line of communication open as well. And the second piece of that, which we'll discuss further, is talking about their end of life wishes, their values, different scenarios where they would feel most comfortable, and what they would want someone to do on their behalf if they were unable to speak. Routine visits to someone's home, I think, are one of the big pieces of really getting a good picture of someone's current medical standing. We know that for a lot of older adults, they're very well skilled at taking a 20-minute phone call and being able to present very well. But I find by going into someone's home and meeting on them with them one-on-one, I can really get a good sense of truly if there's been any changes to their health, if there's any limitations, if their home and their environment still safe for them, or if maybe some recommendations need to be given to increase their safety or look into the next steps as they age. being someone's healthcare agent, we're available 24/7. So that means if someone is hospitalized, there's a sudden event, I will go to the hospital and be able to interface with their physicians, speak on their behalf, and be able to get a good sense of how they're doing. I realize I skipped the physician's visits. For some clients, I go to one physician's visit with them a year, and that's really just to ensure that I have a good sense of what's going on with them medically. I think it also helps alleviate some of our clients' anxiety by having someone there who's taking good notes. I always share my notes with clients so that they can have a good catalog of what happened at the visit. For a lot of people not in healthcare, it can be very overwhelming to just even discuss their own care. So I've seen a lot of benefit for people who really don't need someone to be there. They're happy to have someone, so a lot of the pressure is taken off. And as that relationship builds, then in the future, if there's ongoing healthcare challenges, there's already that relationship with the healthcare agent and their physician. And then lastly, for some of our clients, I do ongoing care management. So that may entail assisting with setting up physicians or the insurance or home health services, ordering of supplies, kind of really being their advocate. I have a gentleman who unfortunately was brought to me because he was a victim of elder abuse, where a man who was hired to clean brush at his home was then put on his healthcare directive. And for myself and his trustee, we're the only two people he has. He has no family or local friends. And so kind of stepping into that role as his healthcare advocate, it's almost like a surrogate family member. Can we go to the next slide, Ken?
Okay. All right. So, for a lot of people who have healthcare directives, and I still think it's a relative minority of the population, some of them are done, on admission to hospital when you're not exactly in the mood to probably deal with that issue. Some are done by some of the people who are listening to us. But I think a good number are done at the recommendation and with the assistance of their estate planning attorneys. A lot of times healthcare directives are at least in my estimation, are the afterthought of estate planning. A lot of attorneys would rather be involved, and frankly, a lot more competent to be involved in issues of, structuring trusts and other entities to try and avoid probate, to do whatever kind of wealth transfer planning they want, to try and protect their beneficiaries. And then at the end, you mumble something about healthcare directives, and then maybe you'll have them fill it out or tell you who they want as their agent, and hopefully a successor agent. And so you've got, and I always used to tell them, before Katie joined my firm, I always used to tell them they needed to have conversations with their family members, but I was a lot less capable of telling them, gee, what should you talk about with your family members? Because I don't remember her name, but there's one writer and speaker in this area who said, just shoot me is not a plan, but that's what a lot of people will say, just shoot me. If I'm no longer able to have a quality life. And so you have an attorney who knows very little, advising a client who knows very little, who's likely going to be appointing a family member who knows just as little as the attorney and the client to make these decisions. And so sometimes, the process falls apart, and that shouldn't be a surprise given the factors. With nobody really leading the way who knows anything, which is why for those clients who choose to, and some of them do not, because they don't want to have a deep dive into these issues. But for those who choose to get counseled by Katie at my firm to work on their healthcare directive, and Katie comes up with an attachment that's far more extensive than what you normally see in healthcare directives, and for those clients who've done it, they love it. And again, many do not. But the American Bar Association does have, and we have it up here, principles of advanced planning that they established with, just to emphasize to attorneys, probably the four who have seen this document, how important it is to designate a proxy, that it's an ongoing process, it's not just hit and miss, and that it's something that they need to be regular communication about with whoever their agent might be, because I do tell clients that as they age, when you go from 65 to 75 and 75 to 85 and 85 to 95, the odds are your views about this are going to change. And that is one of the reasons why Solo Aging Solutions set up the protocol to make sure that there's regular communications, because we need to know what's going on in order to be the informed and independent decision makers that that we need to be in order to act in that role for people. And it's a very difficult situation. We've had a discussion at other meetings here of the article in the Journal of the American Medical Association, which criticized advanced planning. Should we really do advanced planning? What I think we need to do is improve it, not to eliminate it. And we improve it by, I think, involving people who are far more schooled in the issues that people are going to face. Because I do tell people about Pulse, and I do tell them one of the reasons why I can't counsel them or have them sign it in my office is because I'm not competent to do that. But I think that's equally true of healthcare directives when you're talking about the vast majority of attorneys. Now, one issue under California law that's available that I think a lot of people don't take advantage of. One of the things that some people are concerned about is whether somebody they don't designate as the agent under their healthcare directive will try and interfere with the decisions that are being made by their agent under the healthcare directive. And one provision of California law that I think can be important in the right situation allows people to exclude individuals and categories of individuals from at least getting standing to go into court to try and question the decisions made by the healthcare agent, or to determine whether the person actually is no longer capable of making their own healthcare decisions. Essentially going in, where certain people, relatives, friends, sometimes well-meaning, have their own agendas. And I think it's important for the principle of a healthcare directive to know that it's their agenda that's going to be enforced and not some friend. But one of the important things, and the only way this provision is enforceable, is if the individual signing it is advised by an attorney, and the attorney completes a declaration essentially saying they've advised this individual. So while the CMA form, the CHA form, there's a number of forms that are really created so people could fill out healthcare directives without the assistance of an attorney. This is one area where if they do want to exclude the categories of people listed here, they can do so, but they need to have an attorney prepare their healthcare directive.
So as a healthcare agent for Solo Aging Solutions, these are kind of the criteria that we hope to fill for our clients. And it's the same criteria that I review when I'm talking to law firm clients when they're looking to select a family member or close friend to be their agent. It's always interesting to me that age usually is never considered by someone when they're selecting their healthcare agent. Most people want to use a spouse and brother, sister, people kind of in their same age range, which might be appropriate if everyone is healthy and relatively young. But as people age and they want to use their 90-year-old sister who's 2 years younger than them, it's always interesting to me how we don't typically think about, oh, we should really look at having someone a little bit younger and someone who might be able to respond if my sibling has healthcare concerns prior to mine. Another important piece, I think, is someone who's geographically local. We saw with COVID, and I think just with technology, there's a lot that can be done virtually, but there doesn't escape being able to be there to not only release the anxiety of someone who's hospitalized, but I think also getting a really good, realistic idea of what's going on. Andrea and I were at the Los Robles Ethics Committee meeting yesterday, and there was a case that came up of a person who is currently hospitalized on a ventilator, and the sister is his decision maker who is out of state. And a lot of the discussion was her, I don't think, have a realistic idea of truly what's going on because she's not here. and she's basing all her decision-making off of different physicians who she feels were giving conflicting information, and a lot of which I think could have been alleviated if she was nearby. Sorry about that, just got a call. The next piece of real importance is the willingness to follow someone's instructions. A lot of people have a family member in the medical field or someone that they feel is really able to speak on their behalf, but kind of taking that step back to make sure, could that person really make a decision that maybe they don't agree with? Would they have that comfort level? And kind of hand in hand with that is the ability to separate their own emotions. So for a lot of family members, that's difficult because you are asking to stop treatment or withdraw a different intervention that might end someone's life. And while that is something that's appropriate based on their medical condition and the healthcare wishes they've put in place, it's a big decision to have to step in and do that. There's a client who we recently started working with who actually had 2 different physicians who told the facility that they lived in that they didn't know if they wanted to work with him anymore because they felt like they were really providing services to the family because there were such conflicting family dynamics that the own kind of client's medical needs were getting lost in the shuffle because it was all about who had the better idea of what should be done, even though the person was alert and oriented. So it's definitely important to make sure that the right person is able to really speak on your behalf and be comfortable in a hospital setting, not only to advocate on someone's behalf, but I think to feel comfortable speaking up if there's something suggested that really goes against what that person wanted. A lot of people kind of have that white coat syndrome where they get a little uncomfortable talking to healthcare professionals, and someone in this role really needs to have that comfort level. And the last piece I always talk to people about is really the importance of knowing someone's baseline. And by that, I mean really having a good idea of what the functional, the cognitive, just what their current status is, what their current medical ailments are, having a good breakdown of how that person is right here, right now. For a lot of older adults, they're hospitalized with delirium or confusion, maybe dizziness from a new medication or a UTI, and going into the ER, a really chaotic, busy place, that could be presented as maybe that person has some cognitive deficit. And the ER physician who doesn't know this person might not realize, oh, that's because of a sudden change in the medication, or this is a brand new symptom. This isn't something that they've had for several years. This isn't dementia. So I think having someone who's able to really speak on your behalf and know where you are is important. Example of that, I had a client who I helped move into a facility and he had to get a new doctor. He moved from LA County to Ventura County, and home health was brought in. And this client's very anxious. He's alert and oriented, but he does not always present well. He's not good with his healthcare history. He really needs a lot of hand holding. He started reaching out to me and saying he couldn't speak. I can't talk. Something's wrong. I can't talk. So we had a nurse go out and evaluate to make sure there was no signs of stroke or anything sudden that was happening. Nothing was identified, but he still kept saying this. And I knew this was a little different than just his typical anxiety. All it kind of took was I Googled a recent prescription for Valtrex he had put on because he had had a rash on his hand. And sure enough, that was one of the signs. So when I reached out to his doctor, the doctor said, wow, I didn't pick up on that because he, presents so anxious that I figured this was kind of another panic attack he was having. But I think because I've known him a little bit longer and I knew him a little bit better, I could assess that this was kind of a change and we were able to identify it a little quicker. I'm going to go to the next slide. So when having the conversation with clients and clients of the law firm about end-of-life wishes, my kind of 2 biggest ways of introducing the conversation is to really, first of all, meet the person where they are, assessing kind of their comfort level. Sometimes this conversation takes more than one discussion, but my goal is to really have a good sense of who they are and where they are in their mindset and in their healthcare journey. So first and foremost, getting a good idea of their functional status. A lot of the answers, if you're going through hypothetical scenarios and questions, are going to come back to what that person knows now. So they know that they're able to get around, they're able to do things without any assistance, or maybe they've started using a walker and they feel that it's not a big disruption to their life. Kind of assessing where someone is really important, and that's going to change. So that always brings back to why it's important to continue to have this conversation. Some people have had past experiences in the hospital or surgeries or reactions to recovery that also will affect their decision-making. So for me, just getting a good sense of what they've been through is really important for me to understand their values and their views as we kind of go through the questions. The other big piece is assessing, what does quality of life mean to you? I think for a lot of people, that's a really hard question to ask. I try to usually break it down. Would you still have good quality of life if you used a walker, if you were bedbound, if you needed a caregiver to assist you at night getting into bed, kind of trying to present pictures, especially for people who've had no physical or cognitive deficits, so that they have a good sense of what that means to them. Because throughout any decision-making, it always is going to come back to, would I still have a good quality of life? What would my quality of life be? But it's so important to actually know what that means for each person. Would, for example, having dialysis, which would be maybe 3 times a week, requiring transportation, eating up a lot of the day, having the after effects, would that disruption in your quality of life be worth it to maybe later on be able to, have improved renal functioning or be available for a transplant? Those type of things I think are really important to getting a good sense of. And at the same time, what is kind of not good quality of life? What does that look like? Are you completely disoriented? Do you have no cognitive abilities? Are you reliant on someone fully? Or for some people, their barrier's a little higher. They might really feel like any assistance needed, they're not feeling they have good quality of life. And again, I think a lot of these examples change as people experience more healthcare challenges. Next slide. And in having the conversation, I think it's as important to have scenarios and different examples to tell people about, but even using those type of format is more an outline. I think the conversation always far exceeds the questions that I ask them, because things kind of evolve, different scenarios come up, people start to really realize that they've had an experience that they're now realizing is going to come into play with their decision making. While I'm kind of asking questions, I'm not only getting a sense of their reaction to that, maybe that current certain scenario, but also what do seem to be their values and goals? What are they prioritizing? What are they focusing on? Which far exceeds any type of situation, because you can ask 100 questions, but that doesn't mean that those exact scenarios are going to come into play. It's more important to really just get a good sense of someone's views. I like to start with everyone, with firm clients, with solo aging clients. I usually start the first question after I'm getting a good sense of their health history and their functional status and quality of life, to kind of give a really blunt question, almost like an icebreaker. Some people kind of answer back immediately with a no, and most people kind of hesitate. And I say, that's a big question, let's break it down. And then we start to kind of go through different scenarios based on their functional status, their cognitive status. Why are they having a surgery? Was the physician recommending a life-saving surgical procedure with a 50% survival rate because of a sudden event, and they're currently in the same functional status as they are right now? Or have they had a disease process? Have they had decline? And kind of going through each scenario step by step, because obviously someone's views and their answers are going to change as we further talk about different disruptions to their life and what their views of their quality of life are. Next slide. So I think a little bit more familiar with most people is talking about CPR and resuscitation. A lot of people, when talking about advanced healthcare questions, this is what comes to mind for them. And it is a very important question because it really does dictate how someone's care is going to be in the hospital, Again, this is an example of kind of how I typically try to break it down with asking them their views, if they were to be in their current functional status without any cognitive deficits, to looking at, okay, now you have some limitations. Okay, now you're going to be put on a ventilator. You know, what type of scenarios are you going to want just comfort focused care? And that usually dives into further questions about their views of hospice, about their views of pain management. And the conversation can far kind of exceed just this certain type of sudden event that could happen. On the next slide, another kind of set of questions would be artificial nutrition. And I think having a lot of these questions, you know, I think of being in hospice where we do the pulse, and a lot of the time, that's the only time we have to have any of these questions. And they're so brief and, you know, would you want artificial nutrition? Would you want a trial period? Would you want it permanently? And there's really not a lot of discussions about what that looks like. And even when you try to have those conversations with people, they're at a point where they really can't have that conversation. So I try to break it down so that families or that patients and clients can really understand what this means, how this would potentially prolong their life and ensure their current situation, or do they view this as a disruption to their quality of life, and to really get a sense of what that person's views are. Some of the questions I ask are maybe about experimental trials or medications, things that I might not necessarily step in and ever speak on someone's behalf if they weren't alert and oriented and able to make that decision themselves. But I think any type of question where you can get a good sense of someone's views are going to be helpful so that you can kind of build a good knowledge base. That kind of ties into questions about religion or cultural customs. Those have a big factor in someone's decision making. Some people would bring in, you know, a rabbi because they want to make sure everything they're doing adheres to Jewish law, or this is a piece where some people share, you know, in my culture, we don't typically involve the person in their healthcare decisions. Their healthcare advocate's really the person who's speaking on their behalf. And I think it's really important to kind of set that standard so that in those sudden urgent events, there's a good understanding of what would make the client and, you know, the healthcare agent most comfortable, so that they're not kind of figuring out the roadmap in these kind of situations. Lastly, so these are kind of my takeaway from not only being a healthcare agent, but I think also just being a medical social worker in home health and hospice and working at a law firm. I've kind of seen this conversation go from many different ways and many different perspectives. But my biggest takeaway is always, you know, meeting the person where they are and making them feel in control and encouraging them to have this conversation based on them being able to make these decisions versus someone else making them for them later in life, I think really helps people understand how important it is to have the ongoing discussion and to make sure that they are making their needs known. The conversation is always evolving. There's always going to be a change as someone experiences a new healthcare challenge or ages and starts to have a little bit more realistic perception of their decision making. For a lot of my clients who have no deficits, who are completely independent, their views of having any type of assistance really affects their quality of life. You know, the thought of having a walker just really sets them off. Whereas clients who've already had some decline, I think have a much better understanding of how they've been able to adapt, and they still feel they have quality of life. And I think that just really entails of making sure that things are continuously reassessed, because we are really able to respond well to certain challenges that come up, but you don't know until you're in that type of place. Advances in medications and treatments, I think, are always going to be another reason why this conversation needs to be had continuously. And the COVID-19 pandemic really kind of threw an interesting change into some of my questions. I had to add some scenarios based on the pandemic, and there was several clients, I will say, who were very strict on what type of resuscitation or if they wanted to be on life support, very strict answers. And when it came to COVID, everything was completely opposite. I think when people kind of are faced with a pandemic or it's more a tangible disease, they were really able to understand it a little bit better maybe, or not be as unaware of what they don't know. And their answers are very different versus a sudden cardiac event. So I think another important step is to always be kind of assessing where we are currently in the world and different avenues that might change people's answers. From what I've seen, advanced healthcare directives are so general. They're never discussed with healthcare agents. Even when one has been done, they're usually just very basic in terms of, resuscitation, in terms of anyone wanting life-sustaining measures, but they don't really go further than that. And most healthcare agents don't know that they're even listed, which is always interesting to me. So when I especially meet with firm clients, I will sometimes have the person who's going to be their healthcare agent maybe attend our second meeting where I'm kind of reviewing everything to make sure that what I've put in place is still accurate, so that that person can kind of be forced to be in that conversation. Because a lot of people, I think, push it off and think, oh, we'll have this discussion when it's needed, not realizing that that need could be at any time. And I also see in a lot of the advanced healthcare directives, there's a lot of language such as, no reasonable chances of recovery. And if you ask people, well, what does that mean for you? They've never thought about it. They don't know what that means. Does that mean physical recovery? Does that mean you want to make sure that you are still cognitively aware? People haven't even really thought more than just answering those check boxes with their attorney. Likewise, advanced healthcare drivers are rarely showed with medical professionals or hospitals. I have been asked many times, especially in hospice, to contact someone's medical provider to get a copy, which they don't have, or someone will say, oh, the hospital has it, which they don't have. So it's, again, really important for someone to make sure that they keep all their healthcare professionals informed and keep it on record and have those conversations continuously. Because just like with family members, things are constantly changing, and it's in everyone's best benefit to really have the most updated information. And lastly, I've unfortunately seen, from having no advanced planning, no advanced healthcare directive, I've seen what happens when there's been a conservator or fiduciary appointed. For a lot of people who are using a local fiduciary we have in our community, that person will never sign someone onto hospice. So there's people who are still receiving aggressive treatment when even their primary care physician feels they should not. There's also a certain conservator who will not ever sign a post. So again, someone will be maybe put onto hospice, but they're never going to be a DNR. So there's just a lot of things that I think can be prevented when someone has the ability to really do advanced planning and make sure that they're able to communicate their needs, because it's just so important to have the right person in place.
And let me just say that the healthcare decisions law really does say that the courts are not an appropriate place to deal with these issues. And I heard one of the long retired judges in Ventura County who had the probate assignment for a while. She recounted a case that came in front of her to a group of attorneys she was talking to, probably the Ventura County Bar Association probate section. It was too long ago, I don't remember. But her basic premise was, don't bring these cases in front of me. I'm not, this is not what I want to decide. It's not appropriate for me to decide them. And so having the conversations, what Katie was talking about, trying to bring the agent in certain estate planning cases, we try and encourage people to have family meetings so that the family finds out about the estate planning, not when mom or dad had their stroke or dies, but beforehand. So everybody could sort of sound it out. And I think having a conversation about healthcare, because, for most people, a lot of people, even though it's an afterthought in estate planning, it is the most important issue for many, many people. What happens to their money afterwards? Well, whatever it is, if their loved ones blow it, that's tough. That's their problem. But being either kept alive or not kept alive in circumstances where you would want to is something that touches lots of nerves. And and having more informed discussion is really important. And one of the challenges that we have that we've tried to address in the way we approach solo agent solutions is, and in part, one of the reasons why we have interactions with the healthcare team is so that if somebody ends up in the ER or anywhere, our name is all over the place, so they know who to call. And because without the phone call, without knowing that one of our clients needs our assistance and doesn't have the ability to make decisions themselves, we're not going to be as effective. We're not going to be effective. If we don't know, we can't act. So that's one of the things we've tried to address in a couple different ways. One of the other things that I've spoken to some attorneys about, because a lot of the clients we get referred are from other estate planning attorneys who know me and know I'm not, Solo Aging Solutions is not a way I'm trying to attract estate planning business. I don't even want to do the healthcare directive. So because I think there's a conflict of interest. So if a client comes in to Solo Aging Solutions and they don't have an attorney, we refer them out because we do want to be truly independent decision makers. And I just can't emphasize enough, at least from my perspective, over my legal career, how the system has to be improved, and that generally involves getting more and more people involved who know what's going on, and hopefully the system will continue to be improved so that the healthcare wishes of patients are enforced instead of ignored. So Katie, I don't know if you have any other concluding comments. Otherwise, if anybody has any questions, we could happy to answer questions.
Do you want to stop sharing, Ken?
Sure.
So we talked about individuals, you've talked about families and pushing that discussion. How would this look like for an individual who doesn't have family? What's that picture look like? So go ahead.
Katie, you want to start?
Yeah, so for a lot of our clients, they don't have family. For a lot of their clients, I am the surrogate family member almost stepping into that role. And that's really the reason we started Solo Aging Solutions, because so many people are single who are aging, who don't have someone to step in on their behalf. And in that role, it really varies from being their healthcare agent while they're fully capable of making their own decisions and not needing too much support, to later on kind of stepping into being more that surrogate family member who's helping coordinate their care. I always tell clients, I want you to call me. I want to be in constant communication with you when there's changes, just so that I can try to get ahead of things. Because for people who live alone, who are at home, the chances of them deciding to move themselves to an assisted living or getting in-home support and care is very low. Unfortunately, it usually takes kind of a sudden event or someone to come in and say, this isn't safe anymore. And my biggest role in that, and the reason why I think it's so important to make routine visits and stay in communication, is so that I can kind of get ahead of any urgent safety need and make sure that I am providing that support and helping them continue their advanced planning, outside of just healthcare decisions. There's a lot that needs to be done and a lot that needs to be discussed. And while someone's cognitively capable, I think they definitely can be empowered to take advantage of that and to be aware of everything they can do to ensure that their wishes are going to be met, versus a sudden fall, a hospitalization, and then I'm coming in and I'm making those decisions now. Whereas, there hadn't been that conversation done.
Okay, so that's very clear on that. So let's go back. I'm going to take it back a step.
Okay.
Say we have Jane Doe who approaches me when I do a talk on advanced care planning and says, I have nobody, but I'm interested in doing this. I don't have an agent, anybody in mind. And I refer them to you. And she does not have an advance directive. So you're going to do an interview with her. And then what happens at the end of that interview, because she doesn't have somebody to do the advance directive? How does that look?
Yeah, for most clients who come in don't have an advanced healthcare directive, and they don't have anyone in that place. So they're coming to us to set that up. So after kind of a initial conversation, again, to make sure there's comfort level on both sides and we're both electing to work together, we typically either refer someone back to their own attorney, or if they don't have attorney, we do refer out to someone local. Again, as Ken said, so that he's not stepping into that place, because though he is a co-owner of Solo Aging Solutions, he comes at it not from an estate planning perspective. We'd rather have someone go to their attorney and draw up the correct paperwork. And I think at that piece too, there's a discussion about this affects your healthcare decision-making, but it's also good to start to have the conversation about your trust, about making sure that you have the other avenue, the financial piece in place as well. Whereas we won't manage the finances, we do kind of have that evolving discussion about things they can do to continue their advanced planning.
Yeah, and we do, quite honestly, have to get paid. Katie, as a social worker, would like to give away everything for free, but we're not in that position. And so somebody to manage the finances is a realistic, important issue for us to deal with. Obviously, if there's some glitch in that, we're still going to step in and do what we need to do. But having everybody in place, for both the financial and healthcare perspective, I think is what pretty much everybody needs.
So, and to go back and clarify then, when that other attorney draws up the advance directive, you are actually the agent, the decision maker, Katie?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm listed on their advanced healthcare directive as their healthcare agent.
Okay.
Yeah. And in California, it's still the case that a healthcare agent needs to be a human being as opposed to an entity. Maybe that will change in the future. It's the same issue I think that a lot of private fiduciaries have, because some of them are now grouping together so that they have their own succession plan. But when people are naming private fiduciaries for money management, they're still pretty much naming individuals. And then, okay, sorry.
I was going to say I'm usurping the question, so go ahead. I just wanted to clarify that for everybody, though.
Okay, so Andrea asked if we could can everybody get a copy of this presentation? The answer is yes. Terry's got our slide presentation, so you could email it out. That would be fine. And then in terms of our fee structure, so we generally do it, and I am comfortable talking about it, depending on the geographic issues, because our clients in Los Angeles, it's just going to cost more. Frankly, even if we're 3 miles away, our employee is 3 miles away, that could take a half hour to 45 minutes in LA to get to them or to get to the hospital. So in our area, generally in Ventura County, it's generally going to be roughly, depending on the situation, again, $1,800 a year, so that's $150 a month. We have not raised our rates in spite of inflation since we started. But right now that's where it's about, and that's where it's at. And again, in other counties, other areas, depending on the geographics, it could be more. We also, one of the things that surprised us, because as Katie said, most of our clients are in the 75 to 90 year range. Relatively early on, we got a couple inquiries from 47-year-olds. It was actually two men, separate from each other. They had nothing to do with each other, although maybe they were represented by the same attorney. They weren't married, didn't want their parents involved, but really didn't need us to, go with them to their doctor's appointments, assuming they ever went to doctor's appointments. And so we did pare down the services we provided and the cost of those services. But, for somebody who is in, the typical age range, we don't do that, because we need to spend enough time. And one of the things that I'll also just mention, that one of the things I think is going to end up being most important, and Katie and I both have our own family stories about this, is when she goes to doctor's appointments with clients and writes a summary that she sends to both the client and the physician. I think ultimately that's going to end up reducing the number of times that our clients go to their physicians, because half the time, at least a lot of the elders I know who go to the doctor, half the time they probably haven't heard what was said by their doctor. They were nervous, even if they did hear, didn't understand, and don't remember 2 weeks later. So instead of calling the doctor to make an appointment, they call Katie, and a lot of times she could give them the assurances that this is what the doctor said and this is what you should have expected. So I think that's an important aspect to the whole system. Frankly, it ultimately, I think it'll save Medicare a lot of money. Kate?
Katie, hi. Why do you help me understand why you go ahead and have them get an attorney to fill out their advance directive rather than just do it themselves with witnesses? There must be a protection involved there.
Well, maybe I should talk to that. I mean, I'm really
Okay.
the genesis of that, because if somebody wants to attack us, I think it's better if they had an independent attorney who advised them about their healthcare directive. And I think there are a number of attorneys out there who look at the situation while they're coming in for a healthcare directive. If somebody comes in off the street for a healthcare directive, I don't really want it. I mean, how much could you charge for that? But I think some of the attorneys to whom we refer realize, okay, this is like an initial consultation. I'll get to know them. If they need other estate planning, then, because if they don't have an attorney, then this attorney will likely do their estate planning, or at least have the opportunity to pitch them to use them for their estate planning services.
Have you ever worked with people with or entered into the population of people with developmental disabilities?
Not at this point. We've been asked about that, and that may be down the future, but at this point,
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
big can
no.
of worms, but it's important as well. It's a
Totally.
whole new.
very important. Yeah.
Thanks.
Extremely important. So you deal mostly with people, it sounds like almost totally with people who have the financial ability to pay for this. Do you do any pro bono?
At this point, we're not yet doing pro bono. We're still a relatively new business, and again, Katie would love to do pro bono, but we only have so much time, and right now we are devoted to building the company and building the business, and that takes revenues.
I think one of the first things I said 2-3 years ago is, and then we'll make a foundation and we'll have, and Ken said, okay, let's get clients first. So obviously that would be something I would love to do, because there is such a need for people for someone to step in who can't afford to have this service.
Me again. Are there models for this across the country, or are you guys
Oh
sort
my
of on the
gosh, I was
vanguard?
thinking the same exact thing.
Not that we are aware of. I mean, we've spoken to people, not just in California, but elsewhere. And as far as I know, the answer is no, there aren't models. And so, I mean, that's part of what we're doing. We created a model, and it'll be a work in progress as we try and build on it and improve it. And others, I mean, to the extent that anybody here has any other ideas, let us know, because we're all ears.
So you mentioned, does anybody else have questions?
Jazz raised her hand.
Jazz?
Yeah, this is really fascinating and great information. It's so wonderful to know about you and really see your commitment to doing well by your clients. I've only had one similar experience with a patient in the hospital. Actually, more than one patient that was represented by the same person. Similar to what you're doing. What we found, though, that agent was not always available. They chose when to be available, and in the hospital, we need that person to be available on Saturday and Sunday for decision making. So there was that's the only time I've had that experience. And eventually they did come through with, agreeing to comfort, focused care, and hospice. But it took longer than it should have, and they were just not as available as we would have liked. And Kate, you probably have seen more than I have in the hospital.
Yeah, I think a big piece of being someone's healthcare agent is being committed to them and understanding that it is a 24-hour, response that you need to be available for, or making sure that there is something in place if you're not going to be available, making sure that that second agent is aware and that that person's aware, and just, again, making sure that there's that communication, because I truly feel being able to be in the hospital despite, COVID, if that's allowed, there's something to be said just to reduce the anxiety of someone and also to help interface with the physicians. There's so much we can do by phone, but I think it really doesn't take away of the importance of really being there hands-on. And for myself, it gives me a much better perspective of truly what's going on. It's very hard to kind of decipher things via phone and via other people's perspectives, whereas you're able to get in there and really have a good understanding that. So for myself, I feel comfortable making the right decision, because that's as equally important as the person feeling comfortable.
And quite honestly, I think a good majority of people, and I hate to say it, including myself, probably before I met Katie and learned a lot more about healthcare, you really think that being a healthcare agent means you get one phone call, do we pull the plug or not, and then it's over with, as opposed to understanding that it could be days, weeks, or months. It could be in care before you get into the hospital. So there's so much more to it than a lot of people are aware. And as I tell people, when they're appointing people as their trustees, I mean, the people you're appointing have their own lives. They have their families, they might have their jobs, they have their own personal issues, and then all of a sudden you layer this job on top of it, and making healthcare decisions and being available 24/7 is a huge responsibility that most people don't understand. They're agreeing to undertake if, or they should be undertaking if they agree to be somebody's agent.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Andrew.
Yeah, I think too, that's sometimes the shortfall in hiring a geriatric care manager, that their expectation is that, and it's maybe isn't fully communicated to the client, is that, they work a 40-hour week and they don't work weekends, or they don't do this, or they don't do that. And that may be the case, for instance, where, that Jazz is talking about, because I think that some geriatric care managers will agree to be the healthcare proxy for their client, but their expectation does not align with reality when it comes to what happens with that individual. So that's a really important question to ask if individuals are hiring a geriatric care manager for their loved one.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that I saw relatively quickly. We have our clients that are fully capable and I'm really their healthcare agent, and I talk to them several times a year, but there's really not much further that's needed. And then for other clients, they are having me come in not only as their healthcare agent, but also as their geriatric care manager, which I've done prior, but I have kind of created a little bit of a hybrid, because for instance, the gentleman I spoke of who has no one, I'm literally the phone call that's made when he says, I'm having some anxiety, or I think I want to get a new pair of shoes. There's someone that he needs to be able to reach out to that can kind of help coordinate things and serve as that kind of point person for his medical needs. And in turn, I think me having that relationship almost as a surrogate family member only benefits the both of us, because when it comes time that I'll need to make a healthcare decision for him, we have such a good rapport and such an open dialogue that I know so much about his wishes and his views.
So you mentioned, Ken mentioned fiduciary, maybe you did fiduciaries or conservators who step in and they're very inappropriate. So fiduciary can be made the decision maker if their person decides that, or is that an automatic?
Well, if they're appointing a private fiduciary to manage their money and or healthcare in their estate planning documents, they get to designate that person, and that person will agree or not agree. And a lot of the private fiduciaries I've spoken to will agree to do it if they are managing the money. Most have no desire to do it. If somebody is appointed as a conservator of the person, a lot of times the court will set aside the existing healthcare directive. But I suspect, without knowing, because we haven't had the situation come up for one of our clients yet, is that given the opportunity to not have to make the healthcare decisions, somebody might be the conservator of the person and be happy to let the healthcare directive naming solo aging solutions remain in place. How judges will view that remains to be
It's an interesting situation, especially for a post, and you have a conservator who is not willing to sign a document that is,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
unfortunate when, you know, you would think that, oh, great, someone who's stepped in, they've been appointed by the court, you know, there's someone who's going to speak on the well-being of this person. But I'm constantly seeing on the hospice side the barriers that are put up. And our reaction now when we get a referral from a physician for someone who is conserved is we go, oh gosh, because there's just not a realistic understanding, or they've just decided that they have a policy in place that they will not change. And it just never seems to be in the best interest of the client.
It's risk management, I suspect.
I would imagine
Yeah.
that's something that the judge who appointed that conservator needs to know. Like if I was working with a conservator who refused to sign a post, I would ask that the judge appoint someone else, you know? I hear from Ken, I think judges don't want to get into this zone, but then they do need to be appointing people who will take on the entire responsibility, not a part of it, and leave out the most important parts.
So what I'm hearing from this part of the discussion is that we definitely need to have the education be occurring in the attorney judge area. And how we do that would be up to people like Ken. And if Victoria is still on here and part of this, that she's somebody who could approach it from a different direction to open some doors that way. So this has been a huge discussion in this, and I really appreciate it. It's been great. Jazz, did you have another question?
No, I see Irene's hand is up.
I am not seeing these hands. Irene?
Hi, good morning. I had a question going back to the geriatric care manager. Is there because I'm just thinking about, you know, anyone can appoint themselves a geriatric care manager, right? I mean, is there a certification? Is there training so that there's some level of consistency about what folks are getting? Just curious about that. Because I remember back in the day working in hospice and home health, folks were, you know, it was kind of like, wait, what are you doing? And why are you, you know, somebody would, I guess, self-appoint, or they started their own business. So I was just curious how well that's regulated, or if there's training so that there's some level of consistency or certification.
I definitely don't think it's regulated well. I think it's the same as when you were at BV. There is the Aging Life Care Association, which a lot of geriatric managers are a part of, that has good education, and they have their own set of criteria and standards that I think is important. But I've seen people who just have had, you know, a background in gerontology that are geriatric care managers. I think, again, it's similar to a lot of the agencies that we have out here, that it really hasn't been well overseen as of yet. So I encourage people to, if they're looking into a geriatric care manager, to really do their due diligence to make sure that they're looking into someone who's, you know, geographically close by. One of our clients was referred by his own attorney to not a healthcare agent, but to a geriatric care manager, not understanding the difference. And this person was, I think, in Santa Maria. And, you know, and just in terms of being local and being able to respond, the person was honest and said, no, I'll probably see you once a month, but that's it. And so I think for a lot of folks, it's so important that they really have a good understanding of asking the right questions, same as hiring a caregiver agency, or, you know, bringing any support into the home.
And by the way, I've spoken to a number of geriatric care managers, or at least a couple, who have told me that they view it as violating their ethical guidelines to act as an agent. They will not act as an agent under a healthcare directive. That's not the appropriate role for them. I don't have any personal knowledge of that. I haven't looked at their guidelines, but that's how at least some of them see it, and not all of the ones I've spoke to were in California.
Yeah. So, interesting subject. Any other questions? Comments?
I just want to say this was fantastic. Really, really great. And such a needed service.
Yes.
We need to shout about this from the rooftops and build you that foundation, Katie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie and Kenneth. I knew, of course, what Solo Aging Solutions was, but really to see your guys' passion behind it and to see like the reasoning behind it, and it's really needed. And so thank you for doing this. I have a much better understanding of it.
Well, on that note, we will say that we are done. I really would like to thank you, Katie and Ken, for doing this today and letting us use the slides and be putting this on the Ventura County Coalition for Compassionate Care website. I'm excited to be able to share that information.
Great, our pleasure. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, such great work. Thank you very much. And we will be having a general membership meeting in a month. And if you are interested in any participation, I know that Irene and Monica's not here, but they are interested in doing a discussion guide for what we did in April when we were at Dr. Carlo Reyes's house to be presenting that video. So we are still looking at doing some of that work. So keep your ears and your emails tuned to be receiving that information. So hope to see you in August and be looking for the emails, please. Thank you very much and share with others. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.